hear the call? Open your eyes. And wake up. Can you feel the beating pulse of this place? Can you feel your own heart? The charge in your chest. Reminding you that you are alive. Reminding you that you belong to one another. Reminding you that you belong here. In the wilderness.
Please welcome to the stage Keith Vincent of Wilderness.
Good afternoon, good evening. And firstly, I'd like to say to Concordia, thank you very much for having me. Firstly, you might ask, why is a luxury conservation tourism business attending a summit like Concordia? I think it's really important to understand that conservation tourism plays such a vital role in protecting some of the world's wildest pieces of land left in Africa. I would like to just also state that it's also something that can be replicated in South America and Asia, and that's the goals of our business going forward. We've got the humbling duty and great honor of being able to look after 6 million acres of land, and we're entrusted with 6 million acres of incredibly pristine land over the last 40 years in Africa. And we hope to continue looking after that, and not only looking after the current 6 million acres of land, but our goals are simply to double that amount of land under conservation, and then double it again, and then double it again. What I would like to say, if we could go back, and sadly I'm of the age group that has been in this business, started life off as a guide 40 years ago, and here I am today talking about conservation and what role can tourism play in the role of climate change, protection of habitats. And it's absolutely vital, and I was privileged last night to be able to sit at a dinner with the old president of Colombia, and hear about him talk passionately about the Amazon and biodiversity. The wonderful thing about the journey that we as Wilderness have walked over the last 40 years is looking after habitat and the biodiversity, and the importance of that land is not only was important 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and it's even more important in the language we talk about tomorrow. And I really want to talk about tomorrow. In conservation and climate change, we're sitting at the most exciting junction of what I've been in the conservation business for 40 years. And the reason why I can say quite clearly that we're sitting at the most important junction of this opportunity that is ahead of us, and I'd like to treat it as an opportunity rather than a challenge, is because of global warming and deforestation and loss of habitat, loss of key iconic species. You know, in Africa, we talk about the loss of rhino, we talk about the poaching of elephants, etc., and predators, be it lions or be it cheetahs or be it leopard. The same exists for other areas across the world. It doesn't matter where we exist, be it in South America, be it in North America, be it in Europe. And there's lots of wonderful opportunities that are ahead of us. One of the main reasons why it's such an opportunity is the corporate world and the NGO world has taken note. There's more finance that's available today to protect the planet than ever before in the history of conservation. So it would be sort of, in Africa, we would say it would be rude not to take advantage of the opportunity. And what I would like to talk to you about is something what we call under wilderness landscapes. I signed a deal recently in Zambia to extend the restoration and restocking of 2.5 million hectares of land. For people in the hectares world, that's acres, that's 6 million acres odd. And this is a journey of restoring land that has been destroyed, where forests have been cut down either for charcoal or for to provide sustainable, let's call it ad hoc farming for village people. Now, what does this opportunity create? It creates the opportunity, one, to reforest the land that's been destroyed. It also creates the opportunity to restock the land with wildlife. Now, the wonderful part of the journey that we've already undertaken is this is stuff we've done before. So now it's like replicating it at scale. And part of the conversation we were having at dinner last night was, how can we accelerate this? This is a model that can be copied by more than just Wilderness, the company itself. This is a journey that we've walked, and we can stand here today very proudly and talk about pieces of land that are better today than they were 40 years ago, 30 years ago. In fact, some of the problems we face today is overpopulation of a variety of species. If we look at countries like Botswana, where our biggest problem today is that we've actually got too many elephant. Now we're looking at how can we shift. When I say shift a few thousand elephant, I'm talking about probably having to move, and we can get them to walk there, about 50 or 60,000 elephant into Angola, into eastern Angola. Does that opportunity exist? Yes, it does. It takes government interaction, it takes people interaction, it's about creating corridors for wildlife. This happens today, and it's something that we can accelerate. So, I stand here today filled with excitement, and it's hard for an old guy who's been and walked this journey for 40 years to say he's more excited about the opportunity for tomorrow for the next generation. The other hugely advantageous place where we sit today is this is not something that's dreamt up by my generation. This is something that's demanded by the younger generation of tomorrow. And there's the enthusiasm of the planet and the people of tomorrow to create this opportunity to protect the world, to protect the world's natural habitat, to accelerate the reforestation of areas that have been completely devastated, is so vast. And the speed that this generation wants to move at it's like hard not to take advantage of that opportunity. And I'd like to thank the financial world. And it's sort of, I know sometimes people talk badly about the financial world, but it is with that we actually will be able to accelerate this process of protecting what we call biomes and huge landscapes, because we need to protect waterways. So from the sources of rivers to the end of the rivers, we need to make sure that those are unprotected. I'm sure many of you have seen what the reintroduction of wolves did to Yellowstone. This is all critical for the whole, let's call it protection of the biomes and the biology of these areas. But fundamentally, the next big opportunity, and it's something that is absolutely critical for tomorrow's world. One, we need governments in all these areas to create the right framework to allow investment to take place. But with that, it's got to work hand in hand with indigenous communities. In Yesterworld, we talked about the job creations that we would have and the amount of jobs. I have the distinct pleasure, I've got a staff of 3,500 people that work across 8 different countries in Africa, and some people who work for me here in North America as well. The fact of the matter is, of those 3,500 people, they represent 47 different cultures. That's an incredible privilege. Now, in Yesterworld, we talked about creating jobs as an opportunity. In today's world, we've got to talk about how do we improve the economic opportunity for indigenous people in their own habitat. And it's going to be something that it becomes more and more talked about. And I travel the world visiting, firstly, beautiful wild places. So I'm very privileged from that perspective. But if you can actually make a direct contribution, an economic contribution to those indigenous people living on the boundaries of these wild areas, or sometimes inside these wild areas, they will become the custodians of the very existence of mankind. And I want to tell you a quick story before I finish up. 20 years ago, a friend of mine said to me, Keith, the world's wilderness areas will save mankind. And I thought about it at the time, and I thought he was referencing Wilderness, the company. And I said, well, that's an incredibly arrogant statement, my friend. He said, no, Keith, dig a little bit deeper. And here I am 20 years later, and I don't think there's a person in the room who won't tell you that the world's wilderness areas will save mankind. So on that note, I'd like to say, Matt and Concordia, it's a great privilege, and I'm honored and humbled to be here. Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.